Welcome to Trade Talk. I'm Andrew Gelfuso, Vice President of the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center. I'm here today with Her Excellency Amina Salum Ali, African Union's permanent representative to the United States. Your Excellency, welcome to the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate for this welcome. Thank you.
We're thrilled that you're here to join us. In the past, we've had the pleasure of speaking with ambassadors to enlighten our viewers on culture, trade, macroeconomic trends, speaking about their countries. This is the first time we have had the distinction of speaking with a representative for an entire continent. Please tell us about some of the history of the African Union.
Well, thank you very much. As I said, I really feel honored to have this opportunity to talk to you. And I know this is a good vehicle for us to talk about Africa and African Union. Actually, African Union already passed 50 years since our existence. And we did celebrate our 50 years anniversary 2 years ago. And we reflect on the history of what we were, how we were created as African Union, and what are our vision and the objective for African Union for the future.
And you mentioned objectives for the African Union. At its inception, and even today with your mission here in Washington, what are some of your primary goals?
Historically, when African Union, OAU, Organization of African Union, was the mother of African Union. And the OAU was created at that time immediately after independence of some countries. And it was the organization that pushed forward the agenda of liberation for other countries. But as we go along, the leadership of OAU decided to reflect and transform OAU into African Union with the additional objective of looking towards economic development, because many countries have attained independence. So now the focus is more towards economic development for Africa.
So the focus is towards economic development in Africa, and it sounds like that was very important at the inception and creation 50 years ago. How does that translate to your day-to-day work here in Washington?
Actually, because for a reason, that's why we now focus more on economic growth and development. If you look at the trend of our performance, you find there was a time when we were concentrating more on issues of peace and security, because a greater percentage of our continent had conflict situation at that time. But now many countries have already have sustainable peace. They are in peaceful existence. But then we realized the cause of the conflict was because of economic development. Many countries they have very high poverty level. And if you look at all the indicators of human development, you find in Africa, many countries have very low indicators. So then we said, okay, what are the reasons? Why don't we try to focus on the reason why we are underdeveloped, why we still have conflict in some of the areas? Then it was like, why don't we move now towards economic development and challenge those issues that really put us down? Therefore, if you translate those issues in my day-to-day work here, you find that we have to portion our work in promoting economic development, promoting advocacy on partnership between the US and Africa, advocating on investment between American investors and Africa, advocating on issues of health, because if without good health, you don't talk about sustainable development, because development, health issues, human development is key on when you want sustainable development. So when you translate all those factors, you find that most of our time in Washington office, we move and push those areas.
I'd like to transition to the African Summit, the U.S.-Africa Summit that took place not too long ago, where President Obama hosted 50 African leaders. And the topics for the summit, as you well know, included women's issues, trade, youth leadership. Going into the summit, what were your expectations? And do you feel that some of the initiatives were adopted or some of those goals were met for the summit?
First of all, I want to admit that the idea of having US-Africa Summit, it was a great idea. And when it realized, and we had our leaders here in the US, it was an opportunity. First of all, to bring Africa to US, because we have realized a lot of people don't know much about Africa. They have what they get from the media, but they don't know much about Africa. It's like to bring Africa to them so that they get close to Africa. And that, for that purpose, the meeting has achieved a lot, because business community were face-to-face with African leaders. They had discussed on various, they had raised a number of questions. They got fantastic answers from our leaders. And out of that, there are business deals, there were partnership agreement, partnership arrangement, cooperation in different areas. So I would say on a country-to-country basis, there was a lot of success. Now with respect to the continent, like African Union, we have a number of meetings. And by mid-April, there's a delegation coming from Africa. We have Africa-US dialogue, and it's going to happen on the 13th of April. And that is, again, another manifestation of the US-Africa Summit, and another step toward enhancing the partnership between.
And that's coming up here in Washington on April 13th?
Yes, it's going to happen here in Washington on 13th of April.
Thank you. During the summit here at the Reagan building, we had the pleasure of hosting an event with the African Women's Entrepreneurship Program in the State Department. The event brought together about 27 women-owned businesses in a matchmaking business-to-business roundtable type of setting. What do you see as the growing role of women? And I know this is a point that you're very passionate on, as they impact business, economics, trade, and investment in Africa.
You know, women have a very big role to play in trade and of course, investment area. Unfortunately, if you look at what is existing in Africa, you find most of the business that are owned by women, they are mostly the small or medium enterprise. There are very few women who are owning big enterprise. And the greater percentage of women are in the farming. Most of them are peasant farmers. Now, what are the challenges, and what US is doing through AWEP, through Feed the Hunger and other programs, is to motivate women, first of all, to be involved more in trade, but also to move from the small and medium enterprise to bigger enterprise. Now, the challenge that they have, you find many of them, don't have enough capital, and they can't access capital. This is an issue that on all the fora we're talking about, providing equal sort of access to women in gaining capital. Again, they don't have enough, reliable market. This is where you see our web through AGOA. We are forcing AGOA to recognize the role of women within the AGOA framework, so that women can play a bigger role in pushing the AGOA agenda between Africa and US. And again, you have a problem of capacity building, skills development. They don't know the quality that is required, because America is a big market, but you cannot bring in your product unless you know what is required. So the quality issue is very, very important. That comes to training and capacity building. So there are a lot of things I think we still have to do, but I think our WEP is going through the right direction.
And one of the themes, if not the overarching theme of the summit, was investing in the next generation. You just explained to us how important economic stability and economic growth is to achieving and attaining peace and stability. What kind of opportunities do you see available for young people as they grow in African society, in the entrepreneurial and business fields?
I would like to talk on the African Union perspective.
Please.
Because we have realized, when we did the review after 50 years, then our societies were asked a number of questions, what they want to see, what the future Africa they would like to see. And in those questions, different groups, they came out with different answers. Now, when we asked the young people, they came with the suggestion that, first of all, you have to recognize that young people, these are the potential and of course women. But we have to unleash that potential from the young people. How do you unleash that potential from the young people? The only way is to provide opportunity for them to be able to contribute in this society, in African society. Now, what are the areas? We talk about education, but technology and innovation is the key for young people to be able to unleash that potential. Therefore, now if you look at the Agenda 2063, this is in a framework for the next 50 years of development of Africa. In the Agenda 2063, we are talking about taking responsibility by giving technology, background, and now allowing young Africans to involve in innovation. Not only that, but also to commercialize their innovation. Now we are seeing a lot of young people, for instance, when we talk about M-Pesa, you talk about those Keku, whatever, then we have young people who are more involved. We have done some research. We have already established Pan-African University in Kenya. That one for basic science, technology, and innovation. We have done 50, we promoted 50 young people. They've already started to come out with their innovative ideas. So there is a potential, there is a possibility. And it's really exciting. If only our countries will devote some funds to bring in that sort of technology education, by having vocational training, by having a different type of tertiary education, that will be able to be possible.
I want to make a slight transition to something that affected the entire world. The Ebola crisis in West Africa brought worldwide attention to health infrastructures in the affected countries. Can you provide an update on the situation and tell us about the role that you and your office played in response to the crisis?
When the Ebola crisis came up in the world, of course, all of us were taken by surprise, because we know countries like DRC and to some extent Uganda, they had a face-to-face encounter with Ebola, and they managed to really confront it and reduce the expansion of Ebola in those countries. So when it came to these other countries in Africa, we all thought this is a crisis. It was a crisis. And the African Union seized the momentum by having different set of activities. The first one they called the meeting, and then for the first time African Union sent a medical mission in these countries. And medical mission for us, it was something new. We had troops, we had medical people from the medical workforce, we had doctors, and laboratory technicians, we have nurses, we had different countries contributed in providing different set of capability. So we had our people there. And on top of that, for the first time, we have seen the involvement of private sector. Actually, the fund that was raised, it was almost $30 million or so that enabled the medical team and our troop to be able to go to these countries to help. But in addition to that, also we have seen the ICT companies are helping out in providing information to this country where it is needed to inform people how to take precaution in a situation where you have Ebola, how to wash your hands, how to do all those things. It was through ICT, the computer company, that they had also helped. And also now there are some countries we have contribution, donation through mobile telephone, and a lot of things. But now the report I have, some countries have really done well, like Liberia, and but one country is still having those incidents. And now our team may be able to come out of those countries and go to other countries to be able to to eliminate Ebola. Of course, we cannot have zero-sum situation, but now the situation is good, because the number of cases that came out is being reduced. I mean, it's less and less in some countries. So we are very happy, of course, with the support of our partners, especially the U.S.
I was going to ask you, speaking of the U.S. and the partnership, how did you feel the government-to-government relationship went and is going in terms of dealing with the Ebola crisis? Actually,
the U.S. government have done well. Number one, they've helped to send both teams, medical teams and the troops. If you remember, President Obama also asked funds from the Congress, and the Congress played their role by providing support, whatever support we needed. But also it was U.S. government who called other partners by having different meetings. I remember we attended several meetings with State Department. Secretary Kerry called, I think, 2 or 3 meetings, also inviting other international organizations and other countries to be able to help. You know what happened in the beginning, that we did not see much support from that, like a push from other countries, but U.S. was in the leading role to also involve other countries in helping Africa. So we really appreciate the support that we got from.
It sounded like you had a combination of government support and private sector.
Exactly. Which was remarkable. Yeah. Yes.
What role has the African diaspora played in the burgeoning growth on the continent?
Well, first of all, let me put it this way. African Union recognized diaspora as the 6th region, in a sense that we recognize that diaspora have a role to play in African development, both politically and economically. So there are a number of countries they've given diaspora political recognition. Some of them they've allowed to have all those dual citizenship, just to facilitate them to be able to go back to their country and play their part. So we see a lot of investment. For in their countries, when you look at the investment in hotel, tourism sector or in health sector, you find the major part of that investment or the major part of the contribution comes from the diaspora, and we are very happy on that. Especially, let's say, for instance, in the health field, we have some doctors going back to their countries for a number of months to help the Ministry of Health, you know, because of the problem of health system and health infrastructure. So they are playing a very good role to support Africa, and we are very happy. Of course, we think they can do more in the trade sector. Unfortunately, this is what we have been saying whenever we have opportunity to talk to, like CCA, like Chamber of Commerce, and of course USTR office, that motivate the diaspora, give them opportunity to be able to invest in Africa. I
hope some of the diaspora is listening to you right now.
Yes,
and
because
getting more engaged.
Yes, because if you look at other countries, for instance, if you look at, for example, investment from China or investment from India, you find they have access to get finance to be able, you know, because when you talk about investment, you need capital to invest in those countries. And many of the diaspora, they have brilliant ideas, but they lack access to funds. Okay. So I think they need to, some way we need to have a framework where they can get funds to be able to invest in Africa. They can have partnership with China, partnership with Chinese companies, partnership with Indian companies. They are ready. But when you talk to them about funding, this is where the problem is. There are a number of small projects, small opportunity, like market development program that USAID is doing and Western Union is doing. But that's not enough. We need something that can really open a big opportunity for the diaspora.
Now, the U.S. government continues to showcase the growing U.S.-Africa trading relationship through a number of initiatives. As you're aware, probably, there's a high-level delegation going to Kenya and South Africa in June, led by the Secretary of Transportation. Tell us a bit about infrastructure developments in the region and how U.S. businesses can partner on future projects.
Well, as far as infrastructure, first of all, you know that infrastructure is a very, very important sector for Africa. Because all these, when you look at the cost of products compared to the products that come from China, here in the US, you find our own have high component in terms of costing because of transport, that we cannot compete with other products that come from other countries. Now, what do we do in terms of in the future? So we have identified areas, and both within African Union and also within our economic commission, our economic communities like ECOWAS, like COMESA and others. So when you talk about infrastructure, we are our priority is in road network. Our priority is on railway network. Our priority is also on inland waterways, because some countries are landlocked. And then we are talking about energy, because the major component, you find our tariff, electricity tariff, power tariff is very high. So we are also concentrating on energy. And of course, there is this one, Power Africa. It's a project that some of the American investors are going to invest. Of course, we have some already in Africa in the power sector. But all this, I must say, I have to be very frank, MCC have done a lot.
Millennium Challenge Corporation.
Millennium Challenge Corporation in building infrastructure capacity in Africa. You have, many countries have a road program funded by MCC. They also have electricity projects funded by MCC. I know some countries. And of course, you add also energy, the Power Africa project, that also will make a difference. So
it does seem like so much would ride on a successful infrastructure, from supply chain to
yes.
health to energy, as you mentioned.
Yes.
That does seem, essential.
Yes, because what is important right now in Africa is to open up Africa. And how do you open Africa if you don't have proper infrastructure and modern infrastructure? And how do you link one country to the other? Some countries have capacity to produce, they say, food commodities. But then if you don't have a proper, fast and cheaper sort of transport network, you cannot really do what you want to do for Africa. And then we are talking about a continental free trade area that will be possible by 2017, that we have one Africa without border, one Africa as an investment destination. So when you talk about continental free trade area, we have to trade among ourselves in the first place. Right now, we don't trade among, intra-African trade is not as good as you compare the country. If you go to Asia, you see it's more than 50%. If you go to Europe, again, they are also more than 50%, very high. So, but Africa is less than 20%. We are not trading among ourselves. And we can trade among ourselves, and we can process our products to sell among ourselves, and then to have access to AGOA. So AGOA also depends also on the how we develop our own trade mechanism, our trade programs, and also in terms of that, we talk about infrastructure, talk about other things. These are the challenges that we are facing. We are talking about it now.
Staying with the theme of economics, given that 6 out of 10 of the fastest growing markets in the world are in Africa, what do you feel is the basis for this impressive growth? Well,
I could say, because I've been around for some time, and I remember in the 90s when we were having structural adjustment programs, and it was a big headache for many countries in Africa, and but we did it, and you find we have reached that level where we have financially we have managed to bring in financial stability in many countries. And of course, when you have financial stability, then you bring in all those trade liberalization issues, and then you start to look at investment, how to promote investment, how to deregulate some of the difficult things that we were having. I'll give you an example. There was a time among the region, you cannot invest in some of the region. For instance, in East Africa, investment between East African countries was not possible. But that was also recently, they have removed that sort of a block. So what I'm saying, there are a lot of measures our government have done, a lot of it. But also we were lucky in the sense that we had a boom in commodity prices, and our commodity had, even in terms of metal, but there was a time our metal price was very high, and commodity. But now we also have oil and gas in many countries. They have managed to find oil and gas in their countries. So there are a lot of factors that enable us to be able to have that rising sort of growth that we are talking about. But I believe, personally myself, we have to do more. We can do more. We have potential to do more, especially in the industrialization sector. We have not done much in industrializing our things, our countries. Now we have to process our raw material, commodity that we are selling outside. And then the question of utilizing value chain, we have been talking about it, and it's going to work. And then talk about agro industry. that is another sector that everybody is talking about, and we see some government are putting necessary instruments to promote the agro-business. So we have a lot of things to do, and within the time span, maybe we can, within this next 50 years, slowly by slowly, we may be able to.
You've mentioned AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act. As you know, it's before Congress for reauthorization later this year. Please talk to us about the impact of AGOA. You've talked a little bit about the African-U.S. trading relationship, but I'm really curious if you feel AGOA should be renewed, and if so, why?
Well, AGOA is an instrument that really was meant to help Africa and support Africa in the economic development. That was the main objective in like stimulating growth for Africa. And I think in that respect, it has opened up opportunity for African countries to access the American market. Mm-hmm. And we have reason to believe that there is a need to reauthorize AGOA for the next 15 years. Why we are saying this? Because AGOA, it has to be backed by investment.
It's only legislation.
Yeah, it is the only legislation, but it has to be backed with investment. You know, nowadays when you attend all this meeting, you hear about we don't want aids, we want investment. And this is the reality. And since we have the vehicle, which is AGOA, bring in more investment from the US, and then we will be able to see that this AGOA is really benefiting. But it is benefiting, because if you look at the textile industry itself, it has opened up opportunity for a lot of people who manage to gain employment in those sectors. But what is important, you find a lot of women are employed in the textile industry, like in Lesotho, Kenya, and other countries. Mm. So it has its benefit. But mind you, also for the American side, AGOA also has benefited a lot of companies in American side, and also American people. So it's a win-win situation, but we need to go further and see what are the areas that we don't see development. We talk about capacity building. We talk about trying to train our investors in phytosanitary issues. Because if you look at agriculture, not only the products that are not allowed here, but there are other products that can fetch market in the US. But then you find there are the phytosanitary issues. It takes a long time to get approval for a product, agricultural product to access the American market. But we have to know, we have to train our people on terms of what are the health issues that you need to abide with to be able to access American market. There's a lot of things. Again, AGOA doesn't have, it's not backed by funds. It's not backed by any funds. So we have to look. It
provides a framework for private sector businesses in both continents to trade.
Yes, but to the private sector, they also need to be given more incentive to be able to come to invest in Africa. Why? You know, because it's a competition. And you are seeing Africa now. There's a big competition from other continents there who are coming to Africa to invest. So we would like also to see a lot of American investment come to Africa. And for me, I always believe American investors are they are not like others, that they are pioneering. They are not pioneers. They like to see who is there and how far they've gone and how safe it is. So we need really to work hard for that. But there is a potential. And I think to reauthorize AGOA is for our benefit, both Africa and US market. Beyond that, thank you.
Thank you again. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.